Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
What's your point?
What's your point?
In that sense, Trump is right.
The man's damned if he does, damned if he doesn't. There's nothing he can do that you and Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi won't do to try to bury the guy.
Yes, and it's paid for by Bill Gates. Yes, but anywho, so if I out of this 1.5 hour recording, if I cut out all the times that you have inappropriately opened your mouth, we'll probably have 30 minutes.
Find truth about this thing. Why not allow Las Vegas to reopen?
We are officially in Crazy Town.
We have a problem.
Penetrating the United States.
I thought it was safe.
Your future has arrived.
Well, you should be out there getting those UV rays and the sunlight to help, keep the coronavirus away.
Yeah.
And then come inside and inject yourself with Lysol.
Oh, brother, he moved away from that one real quick, didn't he?
Well, if you watch the actual video, he's not suggesting you go do that. All he's saying is he looks over to the doctor and says, it kills the germs on the surface. We can look into it.
I saw it happening in front of my eyes, live on TV. I didn't have to watch a video. And of all the things that you may have thought that he was doing, sarcasm was not one of them, for sure.
No, he was. I wish he wouldn't have said he was being sarcastic, because he was not being sarcastic. What he should have said was, if you recall, I looked over to my doctor and I just made a general comment/question. It wasn't, let's start injecting people with Lysol. And he didn't use the word Lysol either.
Even if you think, no, disinfectant, right? But I mean, how do people interpret disinfectant?
Well, there are a lot of stupid people out there.
That's why somebody like that should not be saying those things, musing from the podium. Even if he wants to consider doing something like that and have it investigated, he should discuss that behind the scenes. That podium is not meant to do a brainstorm on live TV. I mean, that is just dumb.
It's also not there to use to divide us racially, as our former president did. It's not there to say stupid things off the cuff, like, that police officer was a racist, without letting the facts play out.
For which he apologized, by the way, and had a beer summit. Have you heard Trump say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that"? Have you ever heard him say that before? Oh yeah, I know when he said that. He only said that when he grabbed somebody by the pussy on a bus. That's the only time that I've caught him on saying something about "I'm sorry," and that was a script.
Yeah,
from
but
his lawyer.
It's kind of late to apologize when you've already incited riots and burnings of cities and all of that. So,
I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that podium is not for that type of stuff. Go ahead.
But if you go back and watch the video,
right?
It's clear that, to me, it's clear that he's already had some discussion with his doctors about this, and whether or not they said, no, that's a dumb idea, or no, we can't do that, or maybe they said, everything's on the table. We have to look at everything.
Well,
that was clear to me that he had that, and so the comment that he made, he's looking over at his doctors the whole time, going, it's like, we're going to look at everything. We're trying to find a way to stop this virus, and
again,
I
fully agree with you that somebody in his role needs to be open-minded and say anything should be on the table and we shouldn't dismiss anything, right? I mean, I agree with that, whether it's hydroxychloroquine or whether it's whatever else it is.
Yeah.
But again, you don't use that on live TV because then you give people ideas and people are going to self-doctor, and that is just dangerous. You shouldn't do that.
However, I don't totally disagree with you. I don't totally disagree with you on that, because I think he does speak off the cuff a lot, and it comes back to bite him, and he should know better. But I think that's part of the reason why people like him, because he appears to be honest and not trying to spin things. This week, a number of states announced that they were going to start reopening, right?
Right. Georgia, Tennessee, Illinois, I think it was, right? No, Oklahoma,
Florida,
and one other one are, ahead of the pack, essentially.
Yeah. And,
sure.
and back to the point about media bias and media hype and sensationalism. What has the media been saying? Oh, it's too soon. These states or these governors wanting to reopen. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's going to spread the disease.
I agree. Let me stop you right there, because why are they saying that?
I don't know. They have no proof of anything.
So I do know why they're saying that, because the federal guideline presented by, the task force, or however you want to call it, I think it was even the CDC that was behind that, said that the agreement was that we could consider easing the lockdown rules in states where it was shown that the number of cases was consistently going down for a period of 2 weeks. If that were the case, then the prerequisite was there to consider easing the rules. And then it was up to the governors to decide what kind of things they wanted to do in order to ease up the rules, whether they wanted to send kids to school or open up tattoo parlors or whatever. The problem in this particular case with these 5 states is that they don't meet those criteria. The numbers have not been consistently going down for 2 weeks in those states. So forget the idea whether or not you agree that we need to go back. They're not following the guidelines that were given out federally.
They're guidelines. They're not laws.
That is correct.
Okay, and states have their own governments. And if we want to find a cure for this thing, or find find truth about this thing, why not allow Las Vegas to reopen? Call the lady insane. Anderson Cooper all the media is Anderson Cooper just embarrassed the mayor of Las Vegas, and she's stupid and she doesn't know what she's talking about. She's saying, let's reopen. You and I don't have to go to the casino.
So yes, I agree with you. But the point is, you're going to have to have sufficient testing in order to do that in a controlled manner. If the testing is still as low as it is right now, then we don't know how the virus is spreading, and we don't even know right now where it is. Case in point, that we just this past week found out that what we thought was the first case of COVID and death in California turns out to not even be the first case. The first case, as we know, now,
was
about a month before that, right?
Yep.
So until we have 2 things in place, I think, which is testing, and testing on where is the virus is only a snapshot, right? Because it can be different the next day on an individual level. But sufficient testing to at least be able to pinpoint where are the hotspots at the moment that we either know about or don't know about yet. And the other thing is the antibody test, assuming that once you have antibodies that you're immune at least for a season or a year or whatever, even though they don't even know that yet, right? Because we don't know anything about this virus. So I read this morning that the WHO is actually warning against the fact that the assumption that you're immune once you have antibodies is an assumption based on other viruses, not based on this virus. We don't know. But so generally, I agree with you that we should start looking at reopening, and that we need to look at ways to do that in a responsible way with social distancing, with face masks, with the use of disinfectants when you go into public places, whatever it is.
People, whether we reopen or not, people still have to be smart, use their heads.
But that is also, from the get-go, that has been the problem for me in this country, that the way that the system works here is, will make that a problem. As soon as states start to reopen, people that have been suffering over the last, 6 weeks financially are going to jump to the opportunity to go back to work, maybe even put in overtime if they can, despite the fact. Right. So that's what I'm afraid of. And I'm sure that governors and all of that are afraid of the same thing.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah.
That's a good possibility that the disease will then spread even harder than it would in other countries.
Let's talk about alcoholism and the effects of alcohol and where alcohol comes from, and prohibition in the 1920s. And I want to use this as sort of an analogy to our response to COVID-19. And I know you're going to say, well, alcoholism is not contagious. Why aren't we going back to prohibition? Why aren't we closing bars permanently and shutting down liquor stores? Okay, because even though you might say alcohol is not contagious, there's a cause and effect. I go out and drink, I'm harming myself, and I may potentially kill the person driving down the other side of the road because I swerve and I hit them. Or I may go home and get in an alcoholic drunken rage and beat my wife. Why aren't we treating alcoholism and alcohol itself the same way that we're treating COVID-19? Shut down every bar, shut down every liquor store.
I guess because, it's a risk benefit analysis, right? So the only the only thing that we put in place is like an age limit, or we concentrate things around the liquor store where you have to ID in order to buy alcohol, I suppose, right? Do you? I'm not even sure. I guess in some states you do. But in case of alcohol or any of the other things that you mentioned, it's much more dependent and relying on an individual's sense of responsibility, which we hold high, which we hold high in this country. That does not apply to a virus. Simple. Because a virus is contagious, and even if you think you're acting responsibly, you may be transmitting that virus. Unlike when you're drunk in your car, if somebody passes you or you're sitting at the table with somebody who is not drunk, it's not like that person is going to get drunk. So you're not transmitting.
That's not the point. That's not the point. The point is
that is the point. That is the point here.
How many fights? How many fights? How many ER visits? How many car accidents? How many accidents and side effects can you attribute to people being inebriated?
I find this argument ludicrous in relation to talking about COVID-19, to be honest with you. And the reason that I find it ludicrous is that, first of all, we are in the state that we're in because we wanted to protect people. And the reason that we wanted to protect people is that early on we saw what the rate of contagion was, and we were not going to be able to treat the people that would catch this because of the ICU capacity. That was the main reason why the whole world shut down, and everybody around the world agreed we're not going to give a doctor, we're not going to put a doctor in a position where he's going to have to decide between who gets to live and who gets to die. That was the overarching reason that we said we're going to shut this thing down. So here we are, and in some cases that was in time, in other cases it was too late, like in New York City, and in other states it was in time. For example, in Tennessee there was probably never a shortage of ICU beds, I would imagine. So now that we are agreeing from looking at the data and learning what we've learned that we're probably over the hump, we can start talking about reopening. But the reopening needs to be in the context of, what are the things that we can do that minimize the risk that things will spike again to where we will have this ICU overload again, unless we don't care about that and we'll just let elderly people die for the sake of rebooting the economy. If we agree on that, then that's fine with me too. You know, early on we made that decision, and I mean we need to remember that in all this discussion, that we are where we are because of that early decision. Whether that was right or wrong, we'll evaluate, for 10 years to come. So, the whole thing was meant to stop the spread, flatten the curve, right? To limit the influx in the healthcare system, and I think we have to some extent succeeded in that. And at the same time, I'm not sure about that. And now I want to point out two differences that I find interesting, which is the Netherlands, that have a lockdown situation very similar to what we have here in the US. And you have Sweden, that we all talk about because they don't have these lockdown measures. You still see people sitting on sidewalk cafes and mingling and all of that. The lockdown rules are much laxer. So interestingly enough, you can compare these two countries. Netherlands, you can basically read for USA because the situation is similar. And Sweden, where they are kind of lax. And now what you see is that deaths in per 1 million of the population is not even that different. As a matter of fact, Sweden is less. Same for total cases per 1 million population. And even the testing is comparable. So Netherlands and Sweden are very comparable, and the results are more or less the same. One has a lockdown, the other one is kind of lax and says, we'll see what happens. But the question is, and in the end, that is a question of a government or a state governor or whatever. They, in the end, are going to have to make the decision whether they want to take that gamble or not. And that's why I argued. I think the only argument I had with you was about these percentages, whereas here I'm talking about, actual 257 lives versus a percentage. Is that you have to continuously realize that you're talking about people's lives. And not about percentages or numbers or economic benefits.
We are talking about people's lives, and people's lives are affected in drastically different ways from this. I mean, again, it'll be interesting to see what the impact has on suicide rates and on domestic violence rates.
Yeah, those are high. We already know that.
Well, exactly. So my question is, why am I required to stay at home and lock down and require all my neighbors to stay at home and lock down for the sake of not infecting some innocent person, because I may be a silent carrier of COVID-19. But in the meantime, how many people am I affecting or infecting with another disease, i.e. suicide or emotional disease or whatever? Why is there not a balance there?
Well, because that has to do with the idea of what is that term now again? Where if you walk around and you infect 5 people, then those 5 people in turn will also each of them infect another 5 people, and again 5 people. So if you take that and you look at what the impact can be of you being around your neighbor, then that is entirely different from you being at home and beating your wife. So the impact of one choice.
But it's not just me at home beating my wife. It's many, many others at home beating their wives.
Right,
and many others being at home contemplating suicide.
It's not 100 million. No, it wasn't 100 million. It was 100 million would catch it. Like up to 2 million would die. That's what the math was, right? So anywhere between 1 million or 1.5 million or up to 2 million, those numbers have floated around. That would potentially die if we did nothing. And that risk nobody wanted to take. Nobody wanted to roll the dice on that gamble. In combination with this whole ICU thing that we just went over. But there's not 2 million, cases of domestic violence or suicide in the last 6 weeks in this country.
Wait, though. You're right that we don't know what the ultimate or the final tally will be on COVID-19. We don't know what the final tally will be on suicide and domestic violence.
Right. So I don't disagree with the steps that we took early on when we knew nothing. We were all panicking. Oh my God, we have to sit at home and figure this one out. I think that was, and I think everybody around the world agrees, because that's what we all did, right? It doesn't matter whether you were Trump or whatever. Everybody said, okay, let's stop and figure this out. Now we think that we still haven't figured it out. That's the other thing I wanted to mention. So the other thing that I'm afraid of is that individuals like you and me, we now all think that we know everything about epidemiologists, right?
Yeah.
We are all epidemiologists and viral experts, virus experts, but obviously we're not. So what I mean by that is that we have gone from being afraid to better understanding how we each individually have to act in order to be cautious, basically, and do the right thing. I think that is true. So now we get the fear has been replaced by this anxiety or impatience that we want to go back to work because we have bills to pay. And I think that if we don't keep that balance and right, then we're going to make mistakes, because people are going to make mistakes out of selfish, understandable but selfish reasons. And that's where the government comes in, whether it's the state government or the city government or whatever, to kind of steer us towards what probably is the right thing to do, and overall better be overly cautious, because why would you take the risk of having one death that could have been prevented? I generally agree with that, because lives you cannot restore, right? The economy you can restore. Once somebody is dead, they're dead. And an economy you can repair.
In a vacuum, yes. But again, the side effects of a bad economy, of a Great Recession, of even a depression, of people being in isolation for too long, you got to factor that in. You can't just say, well, this is the right thing, and stay at home and do nothing, and nobody can work. You're out of money. You're out of, social interaction, and not look at the effects of that. Those decisions have tremendous effects on the psychology and the economy, and we have to factor that in. I think we're agreeing. We may not necessarily agree completely on this, but I think it sounds like we're agreeing that those states that, if they can smartly reopen, let them reopen. Hopefully the reopening will be like Sweden. Hopefully Sweden won't end up being a disaster zone because of their policies. Let's reopen. And with New York, because their infection rates are so high and their death rates are so high, if they choose to not reopen, great. That's up to Cuomo.
And then the other thing is that, the testing at this point, and for the longest time, I'm just now seeing that actually I hadn't seen that before, but the testing in the US for the longest time was well below what anybody would think is reasonable. Now it has actually, look at that, it is actually 50% over the testing rate in the Netherlands and in Sweden. So in that sense, Trump is right. We are testing up the wazoo. It's still lower compared to a lot of other countries, in particular smaller countries, but that's obviously easy to do, like Luxembourg and all of that type of stuff. But the U.S. has made great strides.
That's a great chart, man. That's really so this is Worldometers.
It's worldometers.info/coronavirus, and that is my go-to site, because it has this information in a way that I like to follow it. It has the test information.
And who owns who started or who owns Worldometer? George Soros?
Yes, and it's paid for by Bill Gates. Yes. But and then just because we're talking about it, and then the hotbeds that we've all talked about, right? Spain and Italy. Those numbers are obviously horrendous. When you go and then when you look at where these countries are located on the globe, the what is it, longitude, right? This horizontal longitude. There's this strip across the globe where the numbers are much higher, which is where these conversations come from about it having to do with temperature and humidity and all of that type of stuff. Because the southern hemisphere has hardly been hit by this yet.
Well, so then why is your media, Hans, making Trump sound like an idiot for suggesting these things?
I think mainly because of the way that he suggested. So it's not gonna, the warmer weather is not gonna kill a virus. It's gonna minimize the spread. The virus is here to stay, right? It will never go away. So sunlight does not kill a virus. Sunlight makes it that you become stronger because of vitamin D on the one hand, and are less prone to getting a cold or whatever, sneezing, coughing, to where you are spreading. And that's why, let's say, during Christmas break, the flu cases will actually visibly go down among young people, for example, because they're at home for the Christmas break. It doesn't mean that the virus is gone. It means that it's not spreading. So
but my understanding,
and that's a nuance that he doesn't communicate. He doesn't convey.
But my understanding is that outdoors in sunlight, that the virus, the germ that is spread to a park bench or to a, I don't know what, jungle gym, whatever, that the virus doesn't die, but that germ that's spread, that viral germ does die quickly outdoors.
Right. So it will live shorter on a surface. Correct.
Yeah. Yes.
That doesn't mean that it lives shorter in you. So the idea that we're going to put light in you, so the idea that we're going to put a UV light stick up your rear end is not going to kill the virus. Not to mention the fact, by the way, no, I mean, I'm serious about that. Not to mention the fact that the people that are hospitalized with this disease have a lung infection that has nothing to do with the virus getting killed. The lung infection is not going to go away. And the lung infection is what's the life-threatening thing, right? Because your body doesn't absorb oxygen through the lungs. So you have to end up on that breathing machine, for which apparently, at least in New York, the mortality rate appeared fairly high. And then the other thing that I heard this past week is that they are now learning, because we're all learning, right? That the number of cases where males in their 20s, 30s, 40s with COVID in the ICU die of stroke. So an age group that is totally not prone to stroke dies of stroke because of blood clots in there. And we've heard these stories before, right? That it appeared to have something to do with blood as well, this virus, not just infection, but also something with blood vessels. So again, we know so little about this thing. That is the problem.
Well, we do, but so why can't we give? I know the answer to this, but to that point, we know so little. Why can't you give him a little grace and slack on these are we don't know. You don't know that sticking a UV light up someone's ass isn't going to cure it. You don't know that.
It's not up to me as a simple soul in the country to think about that and contemplate that. That is something. And again,
that's my point. He was looking at his doctors when he said that.
No. He was doing that in front of a camera that the whole nation was watching. He should do that behind closed doors when they're brainstorming. I'm sure you can come up with similar parallels where in business you've sat in a conference room with a colleague and you've done just crazy brainstorming, whereas you know that if you would have done that in front of your staff, they would have probably wanted to give you some medication. So you can brainstorm, that's fine. And like I said at the beginning, nothing should be off the table. But don't do that in front of, ignorant, uneducated people like you and me, because that's what we are. We are ignorant, uneducated people in this field. So it shouldn't even be put in front of us to contemplate or consider, because we don't know what we're talking about.
That's one of the fundamental differences that you and I have, is that you think that people are ignorant and stupid, and therefore need an elitist government to rule them.
No. We are stupid and ignorant in the field of epidemiology and virology. That's where we're stupid, because we don't have the education. We don't know what we're talking about.
You're right. But the fact that, or the idea that he's with his doctors who are supposedly experts, and I felt like he was trying to give us hope. Again, the man's damned if he does, damned if he doesn't. There's nothing he can do that you and Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi won't do to try to bury the guy. There's nothing he can do.
If you think that somebody telling me that I might be helped by injecting myself with disinfectant,
he didn't say that. He did not say that.
He literally said that. Inject with disinfectant.
He did not say that. His words were, might be, the disinfectant, it kills the germs on the surface. That disease is nasty in the lungs. It might have some effect inside the body. He didn't say go and inject. He didn't say go and inject Lysol into your body. And he looked at his doctors. He looked at his doctors as if, hey, go study this.
It could clean the lungs, right? That's what he said. So how do you interpret that? As taking it in, right? And I mean, but anyway, forget the wording. What I'm saying is, if you think that kind of message gives me hope, then we have to talk about the definition of the word hope, because what it makes me want to do is hop on an airplane and leave this country, because we are officially in crazy town. You know what I'm saying? It's crazy. If he stands there, just like he did with the hydroxychloroquine, and he basically considers out in the open that a totally unproven medicine that works on some other disease that may have some parallels and similarities, that he starts to talk about that may be a cure, and he knows what's going to happen. People are going to take that as, oh, we should try that because our president says that it might help, and we're going to try this. And that's what happened. And now this may very well, we don't know yet. We don't know
that happened. We don't know that happened.
We do know because we started to buy these pills up the wazoo to where legitimate patients that use this medication for their diagnosed disease for which it works, they couldn't get the medication. For example, in Taiwan and in Japan, there was a shortage because people here went crazy over buying those pills. We do know that.
We do. Well, yeah. Send me that source of information of your knowledge.
It's probably a memo from George Soros or an article from the New York Times.
Exactly.
Denying that those kind of things will happen is
I don't deny that they'll happen. I don't
Right.
deny that they'll happen. Unfortunately, bear with me, there are dumb people out there. I don't believe that our government is responsible for treating their dumbness. Okay? I believe that there is a...
Not treating the dumbness, but governments have to protect people from their own dumbness. I do believe that.
That's where we differ, because I don't believe that we need a supreme government to tell us how to operate. Dumb people are going to be dumb, but there are plenty of self-sufficient, perfectly capable people out there of governing their own lives.
It's not dumb, but right. But that's exactly the point. It's not about governing your own life. It's about governing everybody's life. It's because you don't think beyond your property line and your immediate family and maybe your country, if you're lucky.
You know what? I have a very conservative neighbor to the right of me, a very conservative neighbor across the street from me, and we all look out for each other. And you know what? We would look out for you if you were living next to us, because we care about you as a human being.
I live in the Republican stronghold of the immediate suburbs and all of that of New York City, because this is the one county where the majority is Republican. So I suspect that most of my neighbors are Republican, and I enjoy being with them a lot. And I look after them too, and they look after me. So it's not, on a human level.
So
sure.
we can self-govern and look out after each other without without a egregious government infecting or affecting every aspect of our lives.
We actually don't self-govern, because we have a homeowners association here, because my neighbor got 2 dogs for which he thought he could put up a fence. But there's a neighborhood, how do you call that? A bylaw or whatever you call it, that prohibits fences in our neighborhood. So all fine and dandy that you have those 2 dogs, but in this neighborhood we don't want fences. So he's not allowed to put up his fence, period. And that's what a governing body will do. They will protect, what we as a collective have decided should be what this neighborhood looks like, despite his own individual.
Well, there's the key. There's the key. You as the collective have decided, not the government.
Right. Well, but the government is the homeowners association. We decided by voting. We decided who was that homeowners association by voting certain people onto the board, just like we have voted certain people into the government.
Exactly.
Right. Exactly. What's your point?
What's your point?
My point is that Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, and that with her in the White House, the virus would have been too scared to even come to the shores of the United States.
Yeah, because she would have had it assassinated. Hans, you're a great man. You're a great American. I love you. You're my brother. I don't care what you say. I don't care how wrong you are. You are my brother, and I love you, and you should say the same to me.
Hunter, I love you. I'm happy that you are part of my life, and especially now that we can talk more regularly. I love it.
Me too. Me too.
No matter how misguided you are, But I most enjoy the fact that not all hope is lost, in the sense that you and I can be an example of how people can have a conversation. And even if we joke around with each other, in the end, we come to the conclusion that we both want the same thing. We don't necessarily agree on the path of on how to get there. But the main thing is that as long as we hold hands, we will get there.
It's absolutely true. And I can't. Yeah, I was going to try to add something to that, but I can't. That was beautiful.
We have a problem.
Penetrating the United States.
I thought it was safe.
Your future has